Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland, trying to keep the sun out of my eyes. But anyway, so this is where Henry I, Beauclerk, is buried in Reading Abbey, which he founded. So I'll just move somewhere where the sun is not getting right in my eyes. Henry I, he's probably born in Selby in 1068. His father was on campaign in Yorkshire at the time, so we don't actually know if 1068 is his year of birth. One of the younger children of William the Duke of Normandy, William the Conqueror as he's known as. So Henry I was born probably a couple of years after his father conquered this realm and made himself King of England, king by right of conquest, which was something which was accepted probably into the 20th century, right of conquest. Anyway, so then his father died in 1087, and his father had left the Kingdom of England to his second surviving son, William Rufus, and the Duchy of Normandy to his elder son, Robert Curthose, as in short trousers, whereas he was left very little, Henry I. So Henry I, he later purchased the county of Cotonnin in Normandy. But his two elder brothers later fell out with each other, and Henry, he astutely took the side of William Rufus. Rufus means red, as in he had rather ruddy complexion, as well as auburn hair, and was known to stammer when he lost his temper, which was frequently. So he was a ferocious figure, William Rufus. So no, there wasn't primogeniture. The elder son didn't automatically get it. Just like William the Duke of Normandy was born outside of wedlock, so known as William the Bastard to some, but he was bastard by name and bastard by nature. Well, why is this going to be a general insult, meaning a horrid person? Well, that's because these children were so bullied and insulted that they often turned wicked. As W.H. Auden wrote, "Those to whom evil is done do evil in return." And he once had people skinned alive for having mocked him for being conceived outside of wedlock, and indeed born outside of it. He was a very cunning strategist, William I, and won't go into it, but there was a war between William Rufus and Robert Curthose. So much for brotherly love, and there was a siege of Mont Saint-Michel, which is on the coast of Normandy. This magnificent castle, which looks like something out of a mirage. And it's an island for a few hours a day, depending on the tide coming in and out. It's a bit like Holy Island. You can see Mind Walks, a film which is filmed on the beach there, where a defeated Democratic candidate is musing over life, the universe, and everything. Came out in 1998. But anyway, back to Henry I. So to cut a long story short, he and his elder brother later prevailed. There was a battle of Tinchebrai. So Robert Curthose was defeated. He was deposed as Duke of Normandy, and he was imprisoned for the rest of his life. So William Rufus ruled on in this country. He never wed. He was possibly a homosexual. He was decidedly unpopular. Chroniclers are given a very unfair press, because remember, the clergy were really the only ones who could write. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle was still going well beyond his reign, as well as various clerical sources. And remember, apart from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, almost everything was written in Latin. And Henry I, he was very learned, known as Beauclerk, because of that, partly because of his gift for administration, or the emphasis he laid on effective administration. Yet he could certainly read and write Latin well, and not even all royalty could. Didn't bother with English. Who'd want to learn a peasant language like that? And not much was written in French either. So Latin was the language of education. It was the international language of certainly Western Christendom. So then in August 1100, William Rufus was hunting in the New Forest. Yeah, it was new in the 1060s. That's in Hampshire, where his father, William the Conqueror, had cleared out dozens of villages, just evicted these people, and burnt down their huts so they couldn't come back, and said this is a royal hunting ground, and if you're caught poaching deer, if you're lucky, you'd be blinded or castrated, could well be killed. These were really barbaric times. Sharia law was much more humane, had far fewer capital offences than England did until the 1820s, when the penal code was much mitigated in its severity. there was this hunting accident, or was it murder? Whatever happened, or why ever it happened, William Rufus ended up with an arrow in the chest, which was fatal. Now, who shot him? We're not absolutely clear, but Sir Walter Tyrrell certainly fled immediately to France, so he's the prime suspect. Even if he was innocent, he knew as a suspect that he didn't stand much of a chance of survival. Was he told to bump him off? If so, then he might himself be killed just because dead men tell no tales. You can go to the Rufus Stone in the New Forest. I've been there to mark the spot where William Rufus fell. So Henry I was not far away at the time. I mean, some people point the finger at him. Was he the culprit? Did he mastermind this dastardly plot to slay his brother? Well, possibly. Cui bono? Well, he was clearly the principal beneficiary of his brother's death. So he rode straight to Winchester to seize the royal treasury, because that's where the royal treasury was held. And having secured that for himself, he proceeded to London. He demanded the Bishop of London crown him immediately before anyone else could get in there, so he was indeed crowned King of England. Now, shouldn't it be the Archbishop of Canterbury? But part of the reason why William Rufus had such a bad image is because he clashed with the Catholic Church. When a bishop died, he would have to recommend replacements to the Pope. Might recommend one, might give a sort of short list of 2 or 3 names for the Bishop of Rome to ultimately choose. But William Rufus would say, let me think about it for a few years. And in the meantime, the revenue from that bishopric or archbishopric is rolling into the royal coffers. So he'd take a very long time mulling over it. And people saw through that one. He clashed with Anselm, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he'd sent that Italian into exile because, of course, the Catholic Church being the universal church, clergy could be sent from one country to another, just as like English priests later were missionaries elsewhere, bishops in other countries. So, and in Ireland, and Irish priests, some of us, not that I'm a priest, we've been missionaries and bishops in other countries. Anyway, so he was crowned, Henry I was crowned, and he issued various oaths and proclamations to try and really underscore his legitimacy, getting the Archbishop of York to crown him, eventually getting Anselm back, which of course the Catholic Church liked, to really prove that he was a proper monarch and he was not going to abuse the Catholic Church, or simply the Church. The only church organisation allowed was the Catholic Church at the time. I mean, I suppose the people in England at the time didn't even think of having another type of Christianity. So he then, at the relatively advanced age of 31, he married Matilda of Scotland. Originally she was Edith. She was from the old House of Wessex, the old Anglo-Saxon royal family, and he thought this might go down well with the Anglo-Saxons, as in the English people. People didn't really think of them being ancient Britons anymore, Anglo-Saxons, even though the Anglo-Saxons were interlopers, only having come to this island, or to the southern half thereof, in, when was it? Well, from the 5th century AD. Of course, a bit of Danish blood mixed in there as well. So, because remember, the Norman conquest was not long before, was 35 years earlier, well within living memory, and there had been Anglo-Saxon rebellions well into the 1070s, put down only with very great difficulty, like Hereward the Wake on his Isle of Ely in East Anglia, a very marshy region which wasn't drained for centuries afterwards. So he didn't want a recrudescence of that, so he secured some loyalty, and it was ever his study to ensure a continuance of the allegiance of most of his subjects, and he was fairly successful in that. So he had 2 children with Matilda, William and another Matilda, confusingly, but he was a man who was very generous in his affections, and such was his amorous energy, he sired at least 22 children outside of matrimony with his many mistresses. So he'd spread his seed widely, and they were often given preferment, given the surname Fitzroy, as in illegitimate son of the king, Roy as in roi. So you've got the surname beginning of Fitz-Osborne, or Fitzpatrick, Fitzgerald, Fitzgibbon, and so on. That's why. That's also related to fils. What else about him? So he believed in a bit of meritocracy, promoting people who weren't simply out of high-born families in his administration. Remember, almost all his functionaries were clergy, because you could be a priest or a monk, but also a doctor, an accountant, an engineer, an architect, because the church provided virtually all education. and universities as such didn't exist in this time. And Oxford was a bit of a centre of advanced learning. Cambridge was just a swamp at the time, but it wasn't a university exactly. There was the University of Paris, there's one in Bologna, perhaps a few more. Most people were totally illiterate back then. Anything else to say about Henry I? So it was all going quite well for him. There was peace and order, collecting revenues, and wanted to keep that way. He was not going to be drawn into any crusades, and he kept his elder brother peacefully imprisoned the rest of his life. Now, whilst he was alive, Robert Curthose was always a danger. Could he escape? Could he be rescued? Could he start a civil war? But he could kill his brother, but that wouldn't look too good, killing your brother. So he didn't. And then Robert Curthose's son, William Cleto, was at liberty. He was a bit of a threat, but in the end, nothing happened. So it's a testament to his crafty kingship that Henry I's rule was not seriously challenged. He founded this Reading Abbey, as indeed I showed you, where he was finally laid to rest, so ensured good relations with the church, which was no easy matter in those days. Then in 1120, the White Ship was sailing to Normandy at night, and they were having an evening of revelry. So there's a drunken carousing, well, probably led the sailors to not really look where they're going. Well, I suppose they didn't have lights, and they sailed into a rock. They'd hit the rocks, the ship began to list, it was sinking, and they bailed out, going into the lifeboats. So there was William, as in this is Henry I's only legitimate son. So they are going away in the lifeboat, having abandoned most of the crew and the passengers on the ship. And then one of William's half siblings pleaded with them, "No, please come back, take me, don't let me drown here." Very few people could swim, of course, in those days. Remember, it's dark, you're drunk, you're fully clothed, your clothes are going to get soaked and drag you down. So he ordered his sailors to turn around and to row the lifeboat back. We'll actually rescue my sister or brother. And so, yes, the sister and brother climbed aboard the lifeboat, but so did everybody else, desperate to save themselves. And the lifeboat was overcrowded and it sank. And Henry I's only legitimate son, William, drowned. One sailor managed to make it to shore, floating in a barrel. And that's how we know the story. So his son was dead. His first wife, Matilda, had died. He married Adeliza, I think it is, Adeliza of Louvain, as in what's now in Belgium, hoping that he would be blessed with more progeny, but he had no more offspring with his second spouse. So he really wanted to ensure the succession of his daughter Matilda, who was married to Otto, the Holy Roman Emperor, Otto V. So he got everyone to swear, all the barons to swear, that when Henry I, died, they would recognise Matilda as the rightful queen. And they all did so. I don't want to go into the whole story, but when in 1135, Henry I finally did die, most of them promptly reneged on these solemn avowals, and they rebelled against the insurrectionists, managed to try and put Stephen on the throne. Stephen, who wore the crown, was descended from Henry I's sister Adela, who was married to Stephen of Blois. So the Stephen I'm talking about is the son of another Stephen, confusingly, right? And King Stephen, his wife was also named Matilda. But that was led to the 19 long winters and 19 years of civil war. I won't tell you what happened, I shan't spoil it, leave it as a cliffhanger. So that is Henry I, a fairly effective king. He was very energetic, riding around, trying to see that he effectively controlled the country, taxing not too much, pursuing a pacific foreign policy, holding power, and wanting to transfer puissance to the next generation, so that his seed would rule on this realm forever. Well, it did actually succeed. I mean, the Queen is descended from him, but there was a very difficult time after his death. So that's just a little bit about Henry I. Okay, goodbye everybody from Reading in the United Kingdom.